You're going to die penniless. That's what my daughter said to me this morning. She wasn't angry. She smiled when she said it. The way some people smile when they talk to children or dogs. Soft, indulgent, a little condescending, as if I didn't quite understand what was happening in my own life, as if I hadn't been the one to make it possible for her to stand here now, in this sunlit kitchen, pouring organic oat milk into her overpriced smoothie blender. Elle, you don't have to be cruel, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I haven't raised it in years. It's not cruel, Mom. It's just the truth. She dropped half a banana into the blender, not looking at me. You're 78. You have no retirement plan, no income, no savings. Where do you think this ends? She pushed the button. The blades started their scream. I didn't answer. What could I say? That she was wrong? That I had something she didn't know about? The smoothie was green. Some powder, kale, banana, water. Not even a drop of sugar. I watched her pour it into a glass I'd once bought on sale for a Thanksgiving I was never thanked for. You're lucky I let you stay here, you know. She took a sip, still not looking. Some people would put their parents in a home. The words weren't new. I'd heard variations over the years. Little barbs, small corrections, reminders of how much I owed her. But this morning, something shifted. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize for the toast crumbs I'd left on the counter or the TV I'd forgotten to turn off last night. I just sat still. My hands were folded. I felt the warmth of my teacup against my palms. My nails were short, clean, unpainted. I'd been clipping them myself since I was 12. Elle was still standing by the sink. The sun behind her caught the gold in her hair. Hair I used to braid when she was little. She wore a linen blouse that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. A ring I'd never seen before glinted on her finger. Her second husband's gift, I suppose. We'll need to talk about your account soon, she said casually. It's just not sustainable, you living here and not contributing. At some point, we're going to have to make some decisions. I nearly laughed. We. Decisions. As if I hadn't made thousands of them to get us both here. I paid for the first house she ever lived in. I kept her in college after her scholarships ran dry. I bought her second car. Paid for both divorces. Covered her dental implants. Funded 2 of her startups and buried the memory of their failure under my taxes. But all that doesn't matter now. The gratitude, if there ever was any, evaporated somewhere around the time I moved into the guest room of this house I'd helped her buy. It's not really a guest room. It used to be a storage room. Before that, her first husband's hobby space. Now it's where I live. A twin bed, a dresser that still smells of mothballs, a curtain that doesn't close all the way. My own bathroom, at least. No windows, no lock. I sipped my tea and said nothing. That annoyed her. Anyway, I've got a client call in 10. Try not to use the internet while I'm on. The connection lags when you're streaming those documentaries. I nodded. She took her glass and left. No goodbye. The house fell quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the soft clink of the wind chimes outside. Wind chimes I'd hung myself 2 years ago when she still smiled at me sometimes. I sat in the silence. The tea had gone cold. Then I stood up. My knees ached, but not as badly as yesterday. I walked slowly to the guest room. The door creaked. I closed it behind me and locked it, the old way, with the little metal hook I'd installed for privacy. I pulled the shoe box from under the bed, the one she didn't know about. Inside, 3 notebooks, 2 USB drives, a prepaid phone, a laminated card with a bank's logo printed in small letters. One of those newer banks, the kind with no branches, all online, quiet, invisible. And then there was the envelope, thick, taped shut. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was in it, and more importantly, what it meant. She thought I had nothing. She thought I was helpless. She thought she could say what she liked, do as she pleased, and I would just sit there, polite and grateful and quietly dying. Let her think that. Let them all think that. But I know better now, and tomorrow I'll act. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was deliberate. I placed the envelope back in the box, slid the lid on, and tucked it under the bed exactly where it had been. Not because I was hiding anymore, but because some truths are best revealed when the moment comes, not a second before. From the dresser, I pulled out my notebook, not the ones in the shoebox. This one was different. The brown cover was frayed at the corners, the spiral binding slightly bent. I'd started it 2 years ago, the week I moved in with Elle. The first page was neat. It always starts that way. Expenses, contributions, transfers. I had drawn columns with a ruler, dated each entry, used blue ink. Precision helped me stay calm. The pages that followed told a quiet story. $3,200, Elle's dental surgery, implants, upper jaw. $7,000, down payment on the SUV for school pickups. $11,480, private school tuition for Maisie, granddaughter, age 12. $2,400, divorce attorney retainer, Elle. I'll pay you back in 6 months? No one paid me back, not once, not 1 cent. I flipped further, more entries. $2,750, new HVAC system. It's your room too, Mom. $500, Christmas trip they took without me. We'll FaceTime you. $100, rug replacement after Maisie spilled ink. Accidents happen. Then came the ones that weren't about money. Maisie rolled her eyes when I asked her to lower the TV. Elle left the room while I was talking. Elle forgot my birthday. Noticed, logged, quietly endured. The notebook was nearly full. I ran my fingers over the last few blank pages. Space for more, yes. But I didn't want to keep writing in this one. Not anymore. I closed it and placed it in the drawer. From the mirror above the dresser, my reflection looked back at me. Not frail, not pitiful, not yet sharp either, but steady. There was a knock at the door. I waited. Then Elle's voice, half apologetic, half impatient. Hey, Mom, did you take the mail in? I'm waiting on a package. I opened the door. No, haven't been outside yet. She nodded, eyes already drifting to her phone. Okay, if it comes, can you bring it in? It's a client sample. I need it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She didn't notice. After she walked away, I sat back down and opened my laptop. Mine, not theirs. Paid in cash 3 years ago, before I moved in. Elle thought it was old, slow, and barely worth using. That worked in my favor. The hidden account wasn't just a secret. It was a wall. 7 years ago, after I sold the small antique store I'd run since Henry died, I deposited the full check into a separate digital bank account. It wasn't a fortune, just under $240,000, but it was mine. Untouched. Growing. I had told no one, not even my oldest friend, Ruthie. They all assumed the sale barely covered debts. I let them. Elle never asked. She only assumed. That's her way. The account had grown, not wildly, but steadily. Careful investments, small dividends, a government bond or two. After taxes and inflation, it stood now at $287,400. Not bad for someone who was, according to her daughter, going to die penniless. I leaned back in the chair. The house was quiet again. Upstairs, I heard the faint sound of footsteps. Elle on her way to her office, probably. I checked the time. 11:17 a.m. At noon, I had an appointment. One Elle didn't know about. It had taken weeks to get. A financial advisor I'd found on my own. Someone discreet. Someone who didn't blink when I said, "I'd like to separate my affairs from my daughter's household." He'd replied, "About time." I smiled at the memory. I slipped on my flats, buttoned my cardigan, and picked up my purse. Elle's voice called from above as I reached for the door. "Where are you going?" "Just out for a walk," I said evenly. "I need some fresh air." "Okay," she said, distracted. "Don't forget the mail." The door closed behind me. The air outside was crisp, the kind that hinted at autumn, even though the trees were still mostly green. The sidewalk was uneven, the way it had always been in this part of town. My knees protested, but I walked anyway. 2 blocks, then 3, then the bus stop. I knew the schedule by heart. The 11:30 would take me to Main Street. From there, it was only a 5-minute walk to the financial office. When I stepped onto the bus, the driver gave me a nod. I'd seen him before. I was just another old woman on her way to nowhere special. Perfect. By the time I reached the office building, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows. The receptionist smiled politely, took my name, and offered me water. I declined. Then a tall man in a gray sweater appeared. "Mrs. Stewart?" "I'm Daniel." I stood. "Let's talk." Daniel's office was quiet, functional, and without any fake warmth. No motivational posters or scented candles, just clean lines, a neutral rug, and a window that overlooked a parking lot. "I appreciate you seeing me," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. He nodded, professional, but not cold. "Your message was clear. You'd like to discuss your assets and ensure their separation from your daughter's financial influence." "Exactly." I pulled the laminated card from my purse and slid it across the desk. "That's the account, all digital, no paper trail in the house." He glanced at the logo and nodded again. "A good bank. Safe. You've done well keeping this private." I didn't smile. I wasn't here to be congratulated. I want to know how to protect it, long term, and how to cut off any possibility that my daughter or her husband might try to access it when I'm gone. Daniel tapped a few keys on his laptop. "Do they currently have any legal claim? Joint accounts? Power of attorney?" "No." He looked up. I met his eyes. "I know what I'm doing, Daniel. I've just waited too long to start doing it." He leaned back slightly. "You have several options. 1, establish a revocable trust. That gives you flexibility. 2, if you're ready to make permanent decisions, an irrevocable trust offers stronger protection. Either way, we can name a beneficiary." "I already have one in mind," I said, pulling out a folded paper from my purse. "Maisie, my granddaughter." He raised an eyebrow. "Not your daughter?" "Certainly not," I said without hesitation. "Maisie's the only one who ever asks how I'm feeling without needing something." He nodded. "Then we can begin the paperwork today. We'll keep the trust quiet. It won't appear in any family-facing documentation unless you choose otherwise." "Good. And one more thing." I pulled the brown notebook from my bag. Daniel watched as I flipped through the pages, rows of numbers, dates, categories. "I want to make a clean break, but I want to do it smartly. This," I tapped the page, "is everything I've paid for since I moved in. I want a document drawn up that itemizes it, not because I expect to be repaid, because I want them to see it. All of it. On paper, no excuses. Daniel nodded, and I saw something change in his expression. Not sympathy, not pity, but a kind of respect. "We can do that," he said. "Would you like to include a letter?" I paused. "Yes, but I'll write it myself." He gave me a folder of templates and outlines, legal phrasing for clarity and protection, and began inputting the trust information. I signed where I needed to. Every line felt like a brick laid in a new wall. By the time we finished, it was almost 2 p.m. Daniel closed his laptop. "You'll receive all final documents by mail, or we can store them digitally." "Digital is fine, nothing at the house." He stood, offered his hand. "Mrs. Stewart, you're making a wise move." I shook his hand. "I'm done being useful to everyone but myself." When I stepped out of the building, I didn't feel lighter. I felt aligned, like a picture finally hung straight after years of tilting. The bus ride home was quiet. I didn't scroll. I didn't think about what I'd say to Elle when I walked in. I didn't owe her explanations. When I opened the door, I smelled garlic. Elle was cooking. I hadn't seen her cook from scratch in months. She looked up from the stove. "Oh, good, you're back. I'm making dinner. Maisie's staying late at school, so I figured I'd do something homemade for once." I nodded and set my purse down. Elle watched me for a second too long. "Where'd you go?" "Downtown," I replied simply. "Had an appointment." "With who?" "An advisor." No further details. Her face twitched, a flash of curiosity masked as casual interest. "About what?" "Just some things I needed to get in order." I opened the fridge to pour myself a glass of water. She didn't press further. Not yet. But the seed of suspicion was there. I could see it growing behind her eyes. "Did you check the mail?" she asked, flipping a pan. "The sample still isn't here." "No," I said, sipping my water. "Didn't pass the mailbox." She frowned, annoyed. "Well, I hope it didn't get stolen. That thing cost over $100. "I'm sure you'll find it," I said calmly. "You always do." The rest of the evening passed in silence. I ate dinner quietly, complimented the sauce, did the dishes. Elle made a few attempts at friendly conversation, but I kept things light. She didn't ask about the advisor again. She was waiting, gathering, planning her angle. Let her. Let her wonder what I know. Let her feel what it's like not to be in control. For 20 years, I carried everyone. Now I carry nothing I don't choose. Tonight, I'll write the letter. Tomorrow, I'll decide when to send it. That night, I sat at my desk, the lamp casting a soft pool of light over the page. The letter didn't need to be dramatic. It didn't need clever turns of phrase or sentimentality. It just needed to be true. I began with their names, full names. Eleanor Grace Bennett and Charles Douglas Bennett, my daughter and her husband, the beneficiaries of my tolerance for far too long. Then the opening line. "This is a courtesy notice that, as of today, I am no longer available as a financial resource to you or your household." I paused, reread it. It sounded cold. That was good. They had warmth from me for years. They didn't notice when it ran out. I continued. "Since moving into your home 2 years ago, I have contributed financially and materially to a wide range of household expenses and personal costs. I have kept a detailed record of these contributions, which are enclosed with this letter. I have done so without asking for repayment, without seeking acknowledgement, and without interfering in your choices, even when those choices negatively impacted my well-being. This was a mistake, one I now correct." Then came the itemized list. 4 pages, printed cleanly. Everything from dental work to streaming subscriptions, from Maisie's school uniforms to Eleanor's ergonomic office chair. Each line had a date, an amount, and a brief description. No judgment, just facts. I ended the letter simply. I have no expectation of reimbursement. I do, however, expect the dignity of being treated as an adult, not a dependent. I have taken steps to ensure full independence moving forward. Do not attempt to access any of my financial information. You are not a party to any accounts, and any attempt to interfere will be met with legal resistance. You may keep a copy of this letter for your records. The original remains with my attorney, Virginia R. Stewart. I signed it by hand. My name looked unfamiliar on the page, firm, whole. I placed the letter and the printout into an envelope. I sealed it and tucked it into my drawer. I would not hand it over tonight, not yet. I didn't need confrontation. I needed space. The next morning, Elle was already at the table with her laptop when I came out. Charles was next to her, slouched in his usual weekend posture, hoodie, coffee, legs up on the chair she asked me never to use. "Morning," Elle muttered, not looking up. I poured my tea, sat, said nothing. "You're up early," Charles said. His tone was pleasant, surface deep. "I always am," I replied. "Big plans for the day?" Elle asked. "Yes," I said, sipping. "I'm going to the bank." That caught her. She looked up, just a flicker of interest. "The bank?" Charles asked. "Everything okay?" "Everything's just fine." I finished my tea, rinsed my cup, and left the room. The envelope stayed hidden. At 10 a.m., I arrived at the branch. Not my usual one. I didn't want to run into anyone who might mention my visit in front of the wrong ears. The banker was a young woman named Melissa, professional and quick. "I'd like to close a safety net savings account," I told her, handing over an account number I hadn't touched in a year. A backup, one I'd opened under my maiden name. "Of course," she said. "Any particular reason?" I smiled. "It's time to let go of the training wheels." While she processed the paperwork, I asked for something else. "A cashier's check. This amount." I slid a note across. She raised her eyebrows. "Would you like it to be made out to anyone?" "Yes," I said, "but not to my daughter." The name I gave her was Maisie Bennett. I didn't intend to hand it over just yet, but I wanted it ready. Ready for the moment when she would need to know. Someone in this house believed in her. Melissa slid the sealed envelope across the desk. "Here you are, Ms. Reynolds." It had been decades since anyone called me that. I tucked it into my handbag. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked a few blocks to the park, not because I needed the exercise, but because I needed to remember what peace felt like. Families were scattered across benches. Children shrieked near the pond. An old man fed ducks, his fingers careful with each crumb. I sat down and watched. I could have been that old woman Elle saw, invisible, tucked away, pitied for my age and slowness. But she didn't know me anymore. She didn't know that I'd been building this escape in silence for years. She didn't know what I still had left in me, and what I no longer owed to anyone. My phone buzzed. A text from Elle. "Can you pick up almond milk on your way back? We're out." I stared at the message, then turned the phone off. For the first time in a very long time, I decided, let them figure things out on their own. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Elle's voice floated down from her office upstairs, firm, polished, her client call voice. I didn't go in. I didn't want to be seen. Not yet. I slipped into my room, closed the door softly, and opened the middle drawer of the dresser. The envelope from the bank sat there, still sealed. I checked the name again, Maisie Bennett, just to be sure. Then I turned to the small lockbox I kept under my sewing kit. Inside, my birth certificate, a copy of Henry's will, my original house deed, the trust paperwork from Daniel. And now, the printed version of the letter I'd written. I placed the envelope to Maisie beside it. If anything ever happened to me, a fall, an illness, I wanted someone to find it. Someone with sense. Someone who wouldn't pretend I was just a quiet old woman who watched TV and sipped tea. I was putting my legacy in order. That phrase sounded grand, but it wasn't. It was practical. I closed the box, locked it, and slid it back. Then I took a notebook, a new one, and began a different kind of list. Things I do that they don't notice. I listed simple things. I refill the paper towels when the roll runs out. I clean the bottom of the fridge drawer once a week. I restack the dish rack properly so it doesn't topple. I check Maisie's school forms when no one else bothers. I remind Elle to take her iron supplements. I bite my tongue when Charles interrupts me at dinner. I always say goodnight, even when no one replies. There were 10 items by the time Maisie came home. The door slammed lightly. I heard her kick off her shoes. Her backpack thudded against the wall. Then silence, and footsteps toward the kitchen. A few minutes passed before she tapped gently on my door. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart," I called. She peeked in. "Can I sit?" "Of course." She curled into the armchair, knees folded, sweater sleeves over her hands. She looked tired in that adolescent way, not worn out, but full of quiet strain. "Do you ever feel like you're not here?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Like people walk around you, like you're furniture. You're in the room, but you're not part of the room." I closed my notebook. "I do." She nodded, staring at the floor. "School feels like that sometimes, and home too. Mom's always working, Dad's always annoyed. When I talk, they nod, but it's like they're not listening." I didn't touch her with sympathy. I waited. That's what people forget. That silence is a form of love, too. After a while, she looked up. "You're the only one who hears me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I reached for the little wooden box on my bedside table, the one where I kept peppermint lozenges, a needle and thread, and now a folded note with her name on it. But I didn't give her the bank envelope. Not yet. Instead, I said, "I do hear you, Maisie, and I want you to start hearing yourself too. Loudly. Clearly. Even if no one else does." She looked at me. Her eyes were her mother's. Wide, brown, but without the steel. "I think I want to leave for college. Far away," she said. "I know they want me close, but I need something that's mine." I nodded. "Then you'll go. When the time comes, you'll go where you need to go." She smiled. Soft. Not wide, not dramatic. Just real. Before she left the room, she turned back. "Thanks for always seeing me." And she was gone. I stared at the space she'd left behind. I knew that feeling too well. Being present, but unseen. Being useful, but unrecognized. Loving, but unthanked. Maisie was different, and that meant something. That night, I tucked the envelope deeper into the drawer. She didn't need to know about it yet, but when she was ready, it would be there. I was no longer saving just to survive. I was saving to leave something behind that mattered. Let Elle keep her smoothies, her dismissiveness, her courtesy. I had already exited the room, even if she hadn't noticed. I hadn't bought anything for myself in over 5 years, not counting groceries or the occasional box of arthritis cream. I mean something for me, something chosen with no one else in mind. No utility, no justification, no need to explain. That changed on Thursday. It was Maisie's idea, though she didn't know it. We were in the kitchen, her chewing a piece of toast with the unbothered efficiency of a teenager, and me washing the same cup twice just to have something to do with my hands. She was telling me about her art teacher, how they'd assigned an open-ended project. "Whatever feels like you," he said. "No rules." "And what are you going to do?" I asked, drying the cup for the second time. Maisie shrugged. "I don't know. I haven't really figured out what me feels like yet." That line stayed with me all morning. What would I choose if no one else was watching? If no one needed me to be careful, practical, quiet, reasonable? At 11, I got on the bus. Elle thought I was going to the pharmacy. I didn't correct her. The store I entered was one I hadn't stepped into in decades, a small boutique tucked between a hardware shop and a closed-down bakery. They sold nothing essential. That was the point. Scarves, perfume, earrings that cost more than most people would consider sensible. Purses with silk lining, not a single thing on sale. A woman about my age was arranging a row of gloves in the front display. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile you give to someone who isn't in a rush. "Looking for something in particular?" I surprised myself. "Yes, something that feels like me." She paused, then stepped aside, as if I'd said the magic words. The gloves caught my eye first. Navy blue leather, with delicate stitching along the back and a small mother-of-pearl button at the wrist. They were elegant but unfussy. Warm but not bulky. Not flashy. Just right. I slipped one on. It fit without effort. I didn't look at the price tag. I didn't care. "I'll take them," I said. The woman wrapped them carefully, as if she knew this wasn't just a transaction. She didn't ask questions. Didn't say, "What a treat," or "Splurging today?" the way young clerks often do when they see someone like me buying something that isn't beige or discounted. I paid in cash. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want a trail Elle might notice. She still scanned the statement sometimes, pretending it was just to help. I left the store with the bag tucked close. Not because I was ashamed, because I didn't want the moment touched. On the way home, I walked past a mirror in the lobby of the building next to ours. I stopped and looked. There I was, upright, eyes alert, holding a bag that wasn't groceries or prescriptions. No one would notice. But I did. Back at the house, Elle was on the phone, pacing. I could hear Charles upstairs yelling at his game. Typical. I went to my room, shut the door, and opened the bag slowly. The gloves were even more beautiful in the afternoon light. I laid them on the dresser, flat and precise, like a promise. Then I took a pen and added to the new notebook. Things I do for myself. Bought gloves, leather, navy blue. No excuse given. It was a small thing, but that's how change begins. Not with a bang, but with a silent decision that no one sees. That evening at dinner, Elle mentioned bills. "Electric's up again. I might need to shift some of your meds to generic brands. Is that okay?" I looked at her calmly. "Don't worry about the bills." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, someone has to." "I said," I repeated, "don't worry about them." She didn't like that. Control slipping always makes people uncomfortable. But I didn't care. The gloves were in my drawer, waiting. The account was safe. The trust was sealed. The old Virginia, compliant, convenient, cheap, was gone. And no one in this house even noticed. Yet. It started with dinner. Not a holiday, not an event, just an ordinary Thursday meal. Elle had made pasta. Charles poured himself a drink. Maisie had earbuds in, one dangling, one still lodged in her left ear. I'd set the table. Of course I had. No one thanked me. No one ever did. We sat. Elle stirred her plate with a fork, barely eating. Charles scrolled through his phone between bites, the usual symphony of distraction and disinterest. I'm thinking we need to revisit the grocery budget, Elle said suddenly. Things are getting tight. Charles didn't look up. You mean tighter. I took a sip of water. We're feeding 4 adults, Elle went on. And I'm sorry, but Mom, you eat like a bird and we're still over budget. It was said lightly. Almost a joke. Almost. Maisie pulled one earbud out. Why is this coming up now? Because I just checked the bank statements, Elle said, too casually. And I realized I'm covering more than I thought. That was the moment. She didn't say it as a question. She didn't ask if something had changed. She made it a statement, like always. I set my fork down. You went through my banking again? I asked quietly. Elle blinked, as if I'd accused her of snooping in a diary. Well, yes. Just the shared card. I'm not prying, Mom. But I need to know what's coming in and going out. The card hasn't been used in months, I said. Exactly, she replied. That's the problem. I looked at Charles. He didn't even look up. Maisie pushed her plate away. I think I've contributed enough, I said evenly. More than enough. Elle laughed, a short, sharp sound. Come on. You live here for free. We're not charging you rent. No, I said. You're just charging me silence. The words were quiet, but they dropped like glass. Charles set his phone down. What's going on? He muttered. Maisie stood up. I'm not hungry. She left the room without another word. I kept my eyes on Elle. I've been keeping records, I said, since I moved in. What kind of records? She asked, though I think she already knew. Every payment, every contribution, every time I bailed this household out while you looked the other way. Elle crossed her arms. Are you trying to make us feel guilty? No, I'm trying to make you see. She stared at me. A silence fell. One I didn't rush to fill. I don't know what's gotten into you, she said finally, but this tone? It's not helpful. I stood up. Neither is pretending I owe you for the privilege of aging. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I walked out of the dining room and into my room, closed the door, locked it. Behind me, I heard Charles mutter something, probably about moods or crazy old women. I'd heard it all before, but it didn't sting this time, because I was done playing quiet. That night, I slept soundly. No pills, no tossing, no dreams. In the morning, Maisie knocked softly. Can I come in? I opened the door. She stepped inside, sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn up. Are you okay? I am, I said. She was quiet a moment. You don't deserve that, the way they talk to you. I looked at her. She meant it. She was the only one who ever really did. I'm working on something, I told her. Things are going to change. She nodded, then leaned forward and hugged me. Tight, firm, real. No one in that house had hugged me in months, maybe longer. When she left, I turned to my dresser. Time to take the next step. They wanted a dependent, a problem. They'd get something else entirely. I was at the bank by 9:05. The air inside was sharp with air conditioning, the kind that made you feel small and temporary. I liked that. It helped me remember how little emotion belonged in money. just facts, just numbers, just decisions. Melissa, the young woman who'd helped me last week, greeted me with a smile. "Mrs. Stewart, welcome back." I nodded. "I'd like to sit down with someone about my automatic payments and cancel them. All of them." Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "All of them?" "Yes." She didn't ask why, just gestured for me to follow. We sat in the same small office as before, the same plain desk, the same window with no view. "I have a list," I said, pulling out my notebook, the brown one. "Some of these go back 2 years. Most are tied to this household." Melissa adjusted her glasses. "We can go through them one by one." "No," I said. "Let's begin with a full stop. Freeze everything, then we can clean up the specifics." It took her a moment, but she nodded. "I'll start with utilities. You're listed on the gas and electric accounts as a secondary. Remove me. Internet? Same." She hesitated. "There's also a gym membership for a Charles Bennett. That's listed under your family plan. It renews next week." "I've never stepped foot in that gym." Click. Deleted. "There's also 2 school-related payments, one for supplies and one for tutoring sessions. Maisie's still in school, yes, but her parents are not minors. They can manage." We kept going. Streaming services, insurance co-pays, a family Spotify account, an app Elle used for grocery discounts, tied to my email, my name, my card. Line by line, Melissa deactivated each one. By the time we finished, 47 transactions had been halted. She printed the summary. "Anything else?" she asked, polite but firm. "Yes," I said. "Power of attorney. I gave my daughter limited financial access last year. I want that revoked." Melissa nodded. "We'll need a signature and a witness. I'll get the form." When she stepped out, I looked over the printed list. Each line felt like a wire snipped, a current shut off. The word pending sat beside 2 transactions. HVAC servicing, scheduled for next week. Family dental plan renewal. I circled both. Melissa returned with the form and a colleague to witness. I signed. Carefully, clearly, my name in full. Not Mom, not Elle's mother. Virginia Ruth Stewart. Once the witness left, Melissa turned to me. "You understand this may cause complications?" "I understand they'll be inconvenienced." She smiled slightly. "Would you like us to contact them with the updates?" "No," I said. "Let the silence do the work." I left the bank with no papers in hand. Everything was digital now. Quiet. Untraceable. Unless you knew what to look for. Back home, the sun was high. Heat pressed against the sidewalk. The air shimmered. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of reheated chicken. Elle was sitting at the counter, barefoot, typing furiously into her laptop. Charles was in the living room with some game show on, half listening. I moved past them without a word. Elle looked up. "Did you get the almond milk?" "No," I said. "I forgot." She raised an eyebrow. "That's okay. I'll go after lunch." I nodded, walked to my room, and closed the door. Later that afternoon, I heard Charles curse loudly. "What the hell is going on with the utilities?" He was pacing. "Wi-Fi just shut down. I can't log into my apps. The gym app says my membership's canceled. What is this?" Elle responded from upstairs. "Hold on, I'm checking the electric account." It says payment authorization failed. They moved from confusion to frustration in under a minute. Then came the door. 3 knocks, not polite. I opened it. Elle stood there, phone in hand. "Did you do something to the accounts?" I didn't pretend. "Yes." Her jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I'm not your safety net." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I watched her cycle through the emotions: disbelief, irritation, calculation. You didn't even warn us. I didn't need to, I said. The courtesy you've denied me for years is no longer something I owe you. She stared at me. This is going to make things very difficult. No, I said. It's going to make them real. I closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Behind it, I heard nothing for a long time. No one knocked again. No one asked questions. They were busy, adjusting. They'd have to learn what it felt like to cover their own lives. I wasn't going to explain, and I wasn't going to apologize. The law office was in a modest brick building downtown. Nothing flashy. No fountains in the lobby, just clean lines, old carpet, and the smell of dry paper. I liked it immediately. The receptionist was a woman about Maisie's age, all nervous energy and perfect posture. She offered me water, then led me to a private office in the back. The name on the frosted glass: Gerald H. Maddox, Esq. He looked up when I entered. A man in his 60s with silver hair, thin glasses, and the kind of calm that can only come from years of dealing with other people's mistakes. Mrs. Stewart, he said, standing to shake my hand. I understand you'd like to review some legal documents. Please have a seat. I sat. He folded his hands. Let's start with the power of attorney. You revoked the financial one at the bank, correct? Yes, but I'd like to make that formal across the board. Any legal permissions my daughter has, I want them gone. Understood, he said. We'll also notify any third parties. Financial institutions, insurance carriers, healthcare providers. Once the forms are signed, your daughter will have no legal access to act on your behalf. I nodded. Good. And after that, we need to talk about the trust. He raised an eyebrow. You already have one? I started it last week, I said. With a financial advisor. Everything's in place. Assets, beneficiary, protections. But I want to make sure the estate planning side matches. Do you have a specific plan for inheritance? He asked. Yes, I said. Maisie. He didn't ask why. He simply wrote the name down. I want it airtight. No contest. No backdoor options. I can draft a pour-over will, he said. It transfers anything outside the trust into it upon your passing. That way there's no ambiguity. And Elle? I asked. She'll try to fight. He looked up. Do you want her explicitly excluded? I thought about that. Not out of anger, but clarity. Yes. Not disinherited, excluded. By name. He nodded slowly. I'll include a clause that states your intent clearly. Judges respect directness. He started listing next steps. Revocation of all powers previously granted. Confirmation of trust ownership. Pour-over will. Healthcare directive. Letter of intent. Optional, but helpful. I'll draft everything today, he said. You can come back tomorrow to sign, or I can send a notary to your home. I'll come in, I said. Some things are better done in person. He smiled faintly. That they are. As I stood, I pulled something from my purse. A single photograph. Maisie and I 2 summers ago at the county fair. Her laughing, a caramel apple in her hand. Me beside her, caught mid-smile. I slid it across the desk. Add that to the letter of intent, I said. She doesn't need an explanation, just a reminder. He studied the photo, then nodded and tucked it carefully into a folder. Outside, the sun was too bright. I walked slowly to the bus stop, my joints stiff, but my steps sure. I'd done it. I'd drawn a line not just in sand, but in ink, in law, in record. By the time I got home, it was nearly 3. I stepped into the kitchen and found Charles at the table, fumbling with a bill. Elle says the utilities were canceled, he said flatly. You did that, right? I did. He hesitated. That's going to put us in a really tough spot. I opened the fridge, took out the pitcher of water, poured a glass. Then I suggest you talk to your wife. Charles looked at me, not angry, not even surprised, just baffled. It hadn't occurred to him I might act with force, with intention. That's the trouble with being quiet. People forget you have edges. That evening, I received an email from Gerald's office, draft documents attached, ready for review. I clicked them open, one by one. There it was. I, Virginia Ruth Stewart, being of sound mind and judgment, do hereby revoke. The named beneficiary shall be Maisie Lorraine Bennett. I specifically exclude Eleanor Grace Bennett from inheritance for reasons personal and fully considered. Each line was a door shutting with quiet finality. I closed the laptop, picked up the gloves I'd bought, and slipped them on. They still fit perfectly. Tomorrow, I'd sign the papers, and the next day, I'd start packing. Maisie came home late that day. I was in the kitchen, drying the last plate when she walked in. Shoes in hand, hair windblown, cheeks pink from the October air. Sorry I'm late, she said breathlessly. There was an open mic night at school. I stayed to watch. You're not late, I said. You're here. She smiled and dropped her bag by the bench. Then she paused, looking at me more closely. You look different. I raised an eyebrow. How so? I don't know. Taller, she said. Even though you're not. I folded the dish towel, slow and careful. Maybe I'm just finally standing up straight. She opened the fridge, pulled out an apple, then sat at the table with her knees tucked under her chin. Still half child, half woman. Still growing. Still watching everything. After a moment, she spoke. Dad says you've canceled the bills. Mom's been freaking out about it. She had to resubmit the electricity payment from her account this morning. I poured myself tea. Good. She should be used to taking responsibility. Maisie didn't flinch. She just nodded. She also said you're cutting us off entirely, that you're punishing her. I sipped my tea. Maisie, when someone relies on you endlessly and then treats you like an afterthought, you're not punishing them by stepping away. You're just choosing not to disappear. Maisie looked down at her apple, turning it slowly in her hands. She said you're being dramatic. She's always said that, I replied. Anytime I tried to speak up, anytime I asked for respect. She looked up then. You're not dramatic. You're quiet. Too quiet sometimes. I smiled. Not anymore. Maisie studied me for a moment. I don't know what's happening exactly, but I know it matters. And I want to understand. Not like a kid. Like someone you trust. I sat down across from her. Reached into the small drawer near the stove and pulled out a folded envelope. The one from the bank. The one with her name on it. She looked at it, but didn't take it. I've been setting things aside for a long time, I said. Longer than you've been alive. Most of it, your mother doesn't know about. I let her believe I was broke, dependent, soft. It kept the peace. Maisie frowned. But why? Because sometimes we grow up thinking that being quiet is safer than being right. She looked down again, then slowly reached for the envelope. I'm not giving this to you yet, I said gently, but I want you to know it's here. And I want you to know what it means. Maisie nodded, eyes wide now. It means you have a choice, I said, in your future, in who you become. It means someone in your life believes in you, even if everyone else forgets to say it. She didn't speak, but she reached across the table and took my hand. Held it. Firm and small and real. Grandma, are you leaving? I didn't answer right away. I'm preparing, I said. Not to vanish, but to live. On my terms. Her fingers squeezed mine. Good, she whispered. Good. We sat like that in the still kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. She didn't ask for the details. She didn't ask how much, or when, or why I waited so long. She just stayed. And for the first time in this house, someone stayed with me. Not out of obligation, not out of need. Just because they wanted to. It was Charles who found the envelope. Not the one for Maisie. That was locked away. But the draft of the expense ledger. I'd left it on the printer by accident, tucked behind a recipe I never meant to cook. I heard his voice from the hallway that afternoon. Loud, incredulous, thinly masked by laughter. Elle, you need to see this. I stood in the doorway of my room, waiting, listening. Elle appeared a moment later, holding the paper. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning the columns. Dates, amounts, categories, totals. She didn't ask if it was mine. She didn't need to. Instead, she turned to me, eyes narrow. What is this? My record, I said. Of everything I paid for, since I moved in. Her lips parted in disbelief. This can't be right. It's exact, I replied. She stared at me, then at Charles, then back. You've been keeping tabs? No, I said. I've been keeping track. She laughed. That brittle, humorless sound she uses when control slips. And what exactly are you going to do with this? Send us a bill? No, I said. I'm going to show you who I am, since you forgot. Charles crossed his arms. This is pretty petty, Virginia. I ignored him. I kept that list because you stopped seeing me as a person. You saw me as a wallet, a housekeeper, a babysitter, an extra line on the grocery bill. Not once did either of you ask if I was okay with any of it. You offered, Elle snapped. Yes, I said. And you took, and took, and took. She looked down again at the paper. There's a line here for my divorce, she said, almost scoffing. There is, I replied, because I paid for it. She flushed, but didn't deny it. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, Charles said. I'm not trying, I said. I've already accomplished it. What the hell does that mean? I've separated my finances, I said. Revoked your access, canceled all payments, established a trust, and signed everything over to Maisie. The room went quiet. Elle's face shifted. Shock, then hurt, then something harder. You're leaving it all to her? Yes. After everything we've done for you. I didn't laugh, but I nearly did. Tell me, I said. What exactly have you done for me, Elle? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Charles stepped forward. This is absurd. She's a kid. She won't know how to handle. She won't be alone, I said. But she'll have something. A beginning. A voice. The freedom to choose. Elle's mouth tightened. You're punishing me for not coddling you. No, I said. I'm protecting the only person in this house who doesn't see me as furniture. She folded the paper sharply, shoved it into her pocket. I need time to process this. You've had years, I replied. You just never used them. She stormed out. Charles followed. I didn't watch them go. Instead, I went back to my room, closed the door, and sat at my desk. I opened the drawer, checked the other envelope, untouched, still sealed. Maisie knocked an hour later. They're fighting, she said quietly. worse than usual. I know, I said. She looked at me. Are you okay? I nodded. They finally saw me. That's the first step. Maisie sat on the edge of the bed. They're going to be angry. They already are, I said. But that's not my burden anymore. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just stayed beside me, quiet and steady. I reached for her hand. Whatever happens next, I said, you don't have to explain me to them. I know, she said, and I believed her. Elle waited 3 days. 3 days of short silences, half-cooked dinners, muttered phone calls behind closed doors. Charles avoided me entirely. Maisie hovered close but didn't push. I spent most of my time in my room, sorting, folding, finishing small tasks as if preparing for a storm I already knew I'd survive. Then, on Sunday morning, Elle knocked. Not the hard, irritated knock she'd used before. This one was soft. Performed. Can we talk? I looked up from my open suitcase. The soft sweater in my hands was folded perfectly. I set it aside. You can come in, I said. She stepped in carefully, as if entering the room of a stranger, which I suppose in some ways she was. She sat in the chair beside the dresser, crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt. You caught me off guard, she said, with the trust. The changes. I didn't answer. I wasn't there to comfort her discomfort. I understand why you're upset, she added. That almost made me smile. I'm not upset, I said. I'm awake. She blinked, recalculating her tone. I just think maybe we should slow down. Talk about what you're feeling. Maybe we can find a better balance. This isn't a negotiation, Elle. She stopped. I'm not rethinking anything, I continued. I've done the paperwork, I've moved the money. You're no longer connected to any part of my estate. Her mouth tightened. I raised Maisie, you know. Yes, I said. And she's growing into someone very different from you. Elle bristled. This is coming out of nowhere. You've never said you were unhappy. That's because I was busy surviving your version of love. She looked genuinely wounded. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she did. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. I thought we were helping each other. No, I said. I helped. You benefited. She looked around the room, the small bed, the modest chair, the one picture on the wall. Her face softened slightly, as if realizing how little I'd ever asked for. I don't want us to end like this, she said quietly. That depends on what you mean by end. She stood slowly, walked to the door and paused. Would you ever consider changing the trust? Even partly? There it was. The real reason for the visit. No, I said. And if you push, I'll make it legal beyond revision. She swallowed, hand on the doorknob. You're serious. I was serious when I paid your first divorce lawyer in full. I was serious when I sold my car to pay for your roof. I was serious every time you asked, and I said yes. I looked her in the eye. This is the first time I've said no. And that, Elle, is what you can't forgive. She didn't respond. She opened the door and left quietly. I zipped my suitcase closed. Slowly. Cleanly. That afternoon, I sent an email to Daniel, my financial advisor. Please proceed with the final locking of the trust. No changes allowed from this point forward. Confirm when done. He replied an hour later. Confirmed. Irrevocable status complete. No future modifications possible without legal challenge. You're secure. I leaned back in my chair. Let her try. Let them both stew, scramble, whisper about wills and fairness, and imagined betrayal. I hadn't betrayed anyone. I'd simply stopped sacrificing myself. And now, They were meeting the woman who'd always been here, the one who had finally stopped waiting for permission. The final confrontation came on a Tuesday evening. I had just zipped my suitcase. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. A few folded sweaters, my notebooks, the gloves, and the envelope for Maisie. Everything else could stay. I was done carrying more than I needed. Elle knocked, firm, flat. "You're packing," she said, stepping into the doorway. "I am." Her arms crossed immediately. "Where are you going?" "That's not something I owe you anymore." She blinked, thrown off by the answer. "So that's it? You're just walking out?" I stood by the dresser, calm. "I was gone a long time ago. You just didn't notice." "Don't do this," she said. "Don't act like we never cared. You cared when I paid. You cared when I cleaned. You cared when I was useful and silent. That's not care, Elle. That's convenience." She looked to the floor. "We let you live here. You let me survive," I said. "There's a difference." Charles appeared behind her, arms crossed like a shadow of the same posture. "You've been moody for weeks," he said. "Now we know why." I looked at him, unmoved. The fact that silence felt like moodiness says everything. He scoffed. "This is insane. You're giving everything to a kid. To the only one who asked how I was without needing something after." Elle stepped in closer. "I didn't ask because I thought you were fine. No, you assumed I'd always be available, and I was. Until now." She paced slightly. "You raised me. You supported me through everything. And I don't regret that," I said. "But I regret letting you believe it cost me nothing." Silence. Maisie's voice came from the hallway. "She doesn't need to explain herself." Elle turned, startled. Maisie stood barefoot, arms folded over her sweater, eyes clear, no fear in her voice. "This house treats her like background noise," she said. "I see it every day." Charles shook his head. "Maisie, don't get involved." "I'm already involved," she said. "She's the only one who listens." I picked up the envelope from the nightstand and walked toward her. "Open it after I've left," I said gently. Maisie took it with both hands and nodded. Elle looked between us. "So you're just choosing her over me?" "I'm choosing clarity over obligation," I replied. "I'm choosing someone who listens." "You're still my mother," she said, voice tightening. "And I always will be." "But that doesn't mean I belong to you." She stood there, blinking fast, as if trying to summon a better argument, but finding none. Charles muttered, "Don't come back asking for help when your plan falls apart." I turned to him calmly. "I've lived through worse than your disapproval." No one spoke after that. I walked to the door, lifted the suitcase handle, turned once more to Maisie. "I'll call you soon." She nodded again. Steady. Outside, the air was sharp, early autumn biting through the layers. The taxi driver rolled down the window slightly. "Train station?" "Yes," I said. "Please." He loaded the suitcase without comment. As we pulled away, I didn't turn around. I knew what that house looked like. I knew who stood inside. I had nothing left to prove there, only a future to claim elsewhere. The room was small, but it was mine. The key turned with a soft click. No alarm, no waiting faces, no one asking where I'd been or what I'd spent. Just quiet. I set my suitcase down and looked around. One window, one bed, a desk, a chair, and a clean, folded towel on top of the dresser. The welcome was simple, human. It was a boarding house for women, mostly retired, some widowed, some like me. Not alone, just done being used. The landlady, Ruth, had kind eyes and strong arms. She didn't ask for my backstory, just said, "Stay as long as you like," and handed me a cup of tea with a wedge of lemon already in it. That first night, I sat at the desk and opened my notebook. The new one. The brown one stayed locked in the suitcase. That part of the story was over. At the top of the page, I wrote, "I am not invisible. I am not late to my own life. I am beginning now." The first few days passed like a deep breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. I walked every morning, not to get anywhere, just to move. My knees ached by the third block, but I didn't mind. I stopped for coffee, sat in parks, watched people walk their dogs, argue over newspapers, laugh at things I couldn't hear. No one needed anything from me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mistake that for loneliness. I visited the library, signed up for a card in my name, not added to someone else's account, took out 3 books, all fiction, no self-help, no survival guides, just stories. One afternoon, Ruth invited me to a knitting circle downstairs. I didn't knit. I went anyway. The room smelled like cinnamon and old carpet. Women sat in loose chairs, yarn pooling at their feet like quiet rivers. No one asked what I was running from. They asked what color I liked. I said navy blue. They handed me a pair of needles and said, "Try it. Mistakes are expected." That night, I found myself smiling at nothing. It wasn't joy, not exactly, just the gentle weight of belonging to no one, and therefore to myself. On the 5th day, I received a text from Maisie. "They're still angry, still confused. But I'm okay. I started your letter. I'm reading it slowly. You sound different in it. Stronger." I wrote back, "That's because I finally heard myself. And I wanted you to hear me too." No reply came for a few hours. Then, "I do." That evening, I made tea and looked out the window. The street below was quiet. A man walked his dog in slow loops around the lamppost. A child rode a scooter with one light-up wheel. My phone buzzed again. Maisie. Also, I showed Mom the envelope, not what was in it. Just told her it existed. I stared at the screen. What did she say? Her answer came quickly. Nothing. For once she had nothing to say. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle over me like a warm quilt. That was the real inheritance, not money, not furniture, not resentment, but silence. My own. Chosen. Protected. Honored. The next morning I woke early. The light hit the wall in a way I hadn't seen before, gentle and certain. I made a list on the back of a receipt. Buy better tea, get a proper coat, mail Maisie a book, frame the photo from the fair, breathe. At the bottom I added, do not disappear again. And I won't. I'm not returning to that house. I'm not waiting for apologies that won't come. I'm not proving my worth to people who only recognize it when it serves them. I am not revenge. I am not regret. I am something far quieter and far harder to unseat. I am free. It's been 3 weeks. I've stopped counting days now. Not because they blur, but because they belong to me. Time no longer feels like something I borrow from others. Maisie writes often. Small things. Photos of her paintings, lines from books she thinks I'd like, the occasional vent about her father's moods or her mother's silence. She never asks when I'm coming back. She knows I'm not. I mailed her a letter last Thursday. A real one. Ink and envelope. No emojis, no read receipts. Dear Maisie, I'm not giving you instructions. You don't need them. I just want you to remember something. Being useful is not the same as being loved. And being quiet is not the same as being kind. You don't have to earn your place. You already have it. She hasn't replied yet. I don't need her to. There's a freedom in not performing, in not making yourself smaller so someone else feels comfortable. That freedom tastes quiet, like fresh tea before anyone else wakes up, like keys in your own hand, like money untouched by guilt. This morning, I walked to the market and bought peaches. Overpriced and bruised, but real. I came home, sliced one, and ate it standing by the window. Juice down my wrist, no napkin in sight. It reminded me of being young, not in age, but in choice. And it struck me then, I was never old. I was just exhausted from being ignored. They confuse aging with fading, but we don't fade. We're erased. Slowly, politely, until we stop correcting people who misremember us. But not anymore. I've left no door open behind me. No maybe later. No space for guilt to bloom. I'm not angry. I don't want revenge. I want quiet mornings. A full breath. A space where my name is mine alone. The money I saved will go to Maisie, yes. But that's not the real legacy. The real legacy is what she saw. A woman who stopped waiting for dignity to be handed to her and simply took it. I hope one day she tells someone, my grandmother didn't go out angry. She went out free. And if you're reading this, if you've read every part and found pieces of yourself between my lines, let me say this plainly. You are not too late. You are not a burden. You are not background noise in your own life. They may have taken your energy, your sleep, your good years, your kindness. They may have left you to hold the silence while they shouted over you. But you are still here. And you do not have to disappear to keep the peace. You are allowed to take up space, to stop answering questions, to stop explaining. You are allowed to keep something for yourself, even if it's small, even if it's just a pair of gloves, a room with a lock, or the sound of your own voice saying, no, I don't owe you this. Let that be the first sentence of the new story. And if it scares them, good. Let it. Because fear is what they feel when something they used to own finally remembers what freedom tastes like. And now, my dear, if this story rang true, share it. With someone who needs to remember herself. With someone who forgot she was allowed to begin again. Or just keep it. Quietly. Like I did. Until the day came when I finally said, enough. And meant it.